very much. Okay, Aileen, can I ask you to take us through the Sedaring and intimating apologies, please?
Good morning, members. Can I get you to confirm your attendance when I call your name, please? Councillor Barton.
Yeah, thanks, Aileen.
Councillor McGee.
Yep.
Councillor Friel.
I'm here, Aileen, thank you.
Councillor Kevin.
Here.
Councillor Sangster.
I'm here, thanks, Aileen.
I've got apologies from Councillor Maben and Councillor Maitland. Councillor Lennox.
Morning, here.
I have apologies from Councillor Crawford. Councillor Watts.
Good morning, I'm here.
Councillor Filson.
Here.
Councillor Hogg.
Here, thank you.
And Councillor Kyle.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aileen. Members, move on to item 1 on the agenda, and that is the declarations of interest. There's no one in the room, and I can't see anyone online intimating. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, and that is the hearing procedure. I'm going to ask Aileen to take us through that.
We've got one hearing this morning. The planning officer will give details of the application. The objector will then be invited to present their objections and will be given 5 minutes, or in cases of several objectors, up to 30 minutes. The committee will then have the opportunity to ask questions of the objector. The applicant and or their agents, if they're in attendance, will speak for a total of 15 minutes maximum, and committee can ask questions of them at that point. The hearing will then close. Planning officer will give clarification on any issues raised during the hearing, and then the committee can move to make a decision. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Aileen. So members, moving on to item 3 on the agenda, and that is planning application number 25/0520/PP. And that is a change of use of retail unit class 1A to form hot food takeaway sui generis and associated external alterations at 33 Main Street, Comores, and that's KA3 2SZ. Members, Aileen said we do have a hearing for this application. So to start the hearing off, I'm going to hand over to Michael Main, the planning officer, to take us through the application.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Today, members are considering this application for planning permission for a change of use of the building at 33 Main Street, Comores, to a hot food takeaway with external alterations. The application site is located on the main street in Comores, which is the main route through Comores between Comark and Sturton. And it is located within the town centre and Comores conservation area, as set out in the East Ayrshire Local Development Plan 2. The building is of a traditional size and scale, but it's not considered to be of a significant architectural quality for the area. Being in the town centre, there is a property, or it's fronting onto the main street, and predominantly commercial properties are on the main street as well there. There are residential properties, though, to the rear and the north. Full details of the site location and the proposals are outlined in the report, starting on paragraph 3 on page 5 of the papers. The proposal will include external alterations to the building, with the shop front created facing onto Main Street, with the rear window infilled and the extraction flue being taken out of the existing chimney. The applicant proposes to operate the hot food takeaway from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. daily. If I can now turn to the screens, I'll show you some details and photographs. So yeah, this is the just the location of the site within Comores there. The premier store to the south, commercial properties to the west, and then residential to the east up Mill Hill Avenue there. Again, same, just the location plan there. This is detailing the existing arrangements. So yeah, from the site visit, you'll be aware of the property. This is again just the existing arrangements, and then showing the flue coming out the chimney there. And then that is the proposed elevation showing the location of the new frontage onto the main street. That also shows the relocation of the Loudpin stone to the southern end of the building. And this is just an extract from the development plan. It shows the Comores settlement boundary and conservation area. It shows the property within it. This is just a photo of the front of the property, and then the Premier store next door there. This is the rear of the building, so the window closest to us on the back elevation there will be infilled as part of the proposal. And then that's it, just within the sort of town centre context there, with the Premier store and some of the residential properties that you can see over the top of the building. Again facing south towards the town centre and the western and the toll booth there. Turning back to the report, we have no objections from consultees. These are starting on paragraph 15 in the report. In terms of representation, starting on paragraph 18, we have 11 objections and 1 letter taking a neutral stance, and the point raised are noted in the report. The development plan for East Ayrshire comprises the adopted East Ayrshire Local Development Plan 2024 and MPF 4 and the associated statutory supplementary guidance. The report before you at paragraph 29 refers to the relevant planning considerations. Today, members, I'm going to concentrate on the primary considerations within the list and summarise these points for you. In terms of the primary issues, firstly, the principle, the proposed hot food takeaway as a footfall generating use is appropriately directed to a town centre location in the first instance. The building is relatively small scale within the wider context of Kilmore's town centre, and its reuse would impact positively on the character and amenity of the area, as well as help boost the local evening economy. The proposed use is also consistent with the other commercial operations on Main Street and is in a location that hot food carryout would be expected to be sited. The building is in a relatively prominent location within the centre setting, and in principle, the proposed function as a hot food takeaway is considered to be appropriate for this location. It's our view, therefore, that it would comply with the relevant town centre policies. In terms of the design matters, the proposed alterations to form the shop frontage for the hot food takeaway are considered to be appropriate, as the frontage will be of an appropriate scale for the building, using a style of shop front that will harmonise with the applicant's operations at the convenience store to the south. Contemporary materials can be accommodated without causing undue harm to the character and architectural detailing of the building, noting its simple design, and the works are sympathetic to the surrounding, with a variety of traditional and contemporary materials throughout the town centre of Kilmore's and the conservation area. Locating the flue within the existing chimney is a sensible provision that will provide the required functionality while minimising the visual impacts of the development on the building and the surrounding area. Again, the infilling of the window to the rear will also be done in a sensitive manner with the rendered finish to match the existing building. In terms of the impacts on residential amenity, the building is detached from any other properties, and the main access will be fronting onto the main road, which will reduce noise and disturbance from the building. The proposed operating hours of 4 to 9 p.m. daily are not unreasonable for the town centre location, and it's appropriate to restrict the hours of operation of the hot food takeaway to reduce the potential for disturbances during evening hours. The plans detail that the cooling and extraction systems will be designed to minimise noise and odour emitted from the hot food takeaway, with the plans stating that they will both be designed and built to meet the latest legislation in relation to the design and implementation of extraction systems for commercial kitchens. This will include the fitting of filters on the flue to reduce noise and odour from the hot food takeaway. Detailed designs and written verification that the works are built to the required standards would be subject to planning condition if you choose to approve the application. In terms of the impact on the conservation area, the building will be retained and sensitively adapted for the proposed use, ensuring that there is no significant impact on the built form of the conservation area. The external alterations will be appropriate for the building and consistent in terms of the appearance of the surrounding commercial properties. It's noted that the historic Loupin stone, as a detail shown on the plans, will be relocated to the front of the building, to the southern side of the building, and this ensures that the local heritage features retained, while also fostering the reuse of the building. In terms of transport, as a town centre location, there's sufficient on and off-street car parking to accommodate the use. It's also noted that the road improvement works that were approved as part of the previous application to extend the neighbouring Premier store are yet to be implemented, and these are likely to be implemented as works progress on the shop. In conclusion, the proposed hot food takeaway is inappropriately directed to a town centre location, and the development proposals here should support the day-to-day needs of the Comores community. In this regard, the proposal provides an additional service for the community and will remove a vacant building from the town centre streetscape. This will bring a new use to the centre of Comores and help contribute to the vibrancy of the area and local economy, particularly in the evening. The physical alterations to the building are considered to be sensitively designed. The buildings have a simple design, and the alterations are suitable and will be in keeping with the surroundings, and it will not have an undue impact on the character of the building, town centre or conservation area. Thank you, and back to the chair there.
Thanks, Michael. So members, moving on to the next part of the hearing procedure, where we hear for the committee will hear from the objectors. So could I invite Mr. Lindsay Aitchison up to the lectern, please? Mr. Aitchison, we'll give you 5 minutes, and generally what we'll do is, like, if there's a minute before that, I'll just give you kind of gentle reminder just to try and sum up the last minute, if that's okay. Okay. It's just whenever you're ready. Thanks.
Good morning, council members. I object to this application. My objection to this planning application for a hot food chip shop outlet in Comores is for the following reasons. The said building, the Carbon, has never ever been a retail outlet, as stated in the report. It was a Carbon used by the community. We already have various food takeaway in the village centre. Pubs selling food, Chinese takeaway, a baker's shop selling takeaway food, a cafe selling food. All of these premises are within a few yards of each other and of this proposal. This would be oversaturation in the area of food outlets. We do not need another one. A chip shop or hot food outlet would release many odours and smells into the air, and the flue in the roof of this proposed shop would only be a few metres from the residents' homes, 15, 20 metres. It's far too close. Litter would become a big issue in the area. Noise and use hanging around would also be another issue into the evening. But a major issue, main concerns arise from road safety. The Premier store next to the proposed shop has been extended and the work is still in progress. This caused the car park to be removed permanently. There is now no car park at the shop. The said car park, situated behind the Western pub on the Fenwick Road, is full day and evening. It is now used more as a car park as the car park was removed from the shop. There is now far less opportunity to park your car in this area safely. Mill Hill Avenue and Main Road corner has now become totally chaotic with illegal parking. Cars now park all over the place. They park on the corner, both sides. They park on Mill Hill Avenue on the pavement and too close to the corner. They park dangerously and without thought to residents. Very rudely. They make it very difficult to enter or exit their driveways safely, as it was this morning trying to get here. Adding another shop to this already chaotic area will only make things worse. Local residents and school children are obstructed from walking safely. I witness this on a daily basis. The pavement in front of the Carbon has just become a car park. The disabled parking bays are totally ignored. The whole area is an accident waiting to happen. I totally disagree that the hot food takeaway on this site would have no detrimental impact to road users and pedestrians, as is stated in the report. Allowing this to go ahead would only cause it all to get worse. The chaos would be continue into the evenings with poor parking, engines running, noise, etc. This building's only going to deteriorate due to the no longer use to the community, because it was taken away from the community. So my main concerns and objections are: it's not required, it's oversaturated, it'll add nothing to the area, increased traffic causing many issues with unsafe, dangerous, thoughtless parking, disruption, obstruction and unsafe areas for residents and children to walk, noise, litter and smells, and a congregation of use at the shop in the corner. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aitchison. At this point, I'll open it up to the committee to see if they've got any questions for yourself.
Okay.
Members, any questions? Councillor McGee.
Morning, Lindsay.
Morning.
On your point, it's oversaturation of kind of like takeaways. Given that the operating hours are 4 PM to 9 PM, Monday to Sundays, unless otherwise agreed differently, would that no suggest that it's different opening hours for the likes of the cafe or the bakers across the road? Okay, now that'll be opening,
But not to the
they'll
pub
be shut.
outlets that's selling food. They're still open at that time. It's only the baker's shop that will be closed.
Mr. Aitchison, can I just ask you to just see, press the button just to put your mic off while...
Put it off.
Yeah, thanks. Members, any further questions? I don't see anything else at mine. So, thank you very much, Mr. Aitchison. And if you just return to the public gallery, that would be much appreciated. Thanks. Thank you. Members, we don't have the applicant with us today, so we're just going to go past that procedure. In fact, I think at this point we close the hearing and hand back over to Michael, who will cover any points raised up during the hearing procedure. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just to run through a summary of the points raised. In terms of the oversaturation of commercial units and food units, it is a town centre location that we would be looking to direct your food units to as a footfall generating use. We've also summarised in paragraph 42 of the report. We've looked at the other provisions within the town centre, and we're content that there wasn't an over provision. In terms of the issues with odour and smell, environmental health have been consulted. They have no objection subject to the condition in relation to the extraction, cooling extraction systems being details being provided. That would be attached as a condition within the recommendation there. Again, litter has been raised within the representations, and to combat that, we have recommended a condition in relation to a waste management strategy for bins to the front of the building as well, to combat that. In terms of road safety, as I said as well, there's the road safety improvements or the road improvements that should be implemented as part of the extension. We would expect these to be done. But yeah, I can pass over to Barry from Roads to comment further from the road safety aspect if you'd like.
Thanks, Chair. There was a couple of points made there just in relation to the removal of the car park, and the comments regarding the Fenwick Road car park, particular that's full day and evening. So that's something we can look at in terms of potentially introducing waiting restrictions just to try and encourage the type of turnover that's required within the car park. The lay-by that's conditioned as part of the proposals at the front of the shop, that's something else we can consider in terms of waiting restrictions. As I say, just to get that turnover of parking to enable the shop and the chip shop as well to be accessed. And there is other parking available elsewhere within the village on street. Illegal parking issues, that's something that we seek to address through increased enforcement patrols in the near future. We're currently going through a service review to try and enable more patrols out with Kilmarnock. And in terms of increased traffic, I think we consider that any traffic associated with it would be drawn for the existing traffic levels that are already passing through the village centre. So in saying that, we don't consider that it's going to be additional traffic as such. So that was only the kind of points that I picked up there.
All right, do you have anything further to come in, Michael? No. So it's yep. So at this point, I'm now going to open it up. So, Councillor Filson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering if we could put that photograph of the front elevation again, please, of the premises. And maybe actually, Michael, if you could maybe can you clarify just about the car parking side of things. I know they're ongoing things not finished with the Premier shop itself. If you could maybe speak how the car parking is going to be at the front of it, because there's quite a lot of bollards there as well, I see.
Sorry, just having a few technical problems trying to get this to load. I'll maybe, hopefully this is it coming now, and then Michael can just add in anything he needs to add. Maybe not. Would that do? That's an image for you, Councillor?
There was another one there I seen earlier on, I think. It's right, that one there.
That one there.
Could you just describe just what's going to actually happen there after the Premier work is done, and then if this went ahead, how the car parking would be at the front of the shop? That would be just to clarify things a wee bit.
Yep, sure. Effectively, there should be no on the pavement parking once the road or the consented works have been implemented. We do have a plan that we can show you as well with the consented works.
So would that be an in and an out there, basically? I don't know.
No, what we would have is bollards around the pavement to stop cars getting on, and there would be a service lay-by that can accommodate 2 or 3 cars depending on how people are parking. So the pavement would be narrowed marginally to accommodate the lay-by, but yeah, other than that, it should be there should be no access for cars onto the footpath once that's been implemented.
Is there a plan that shows that we could maybe see?
Yeah.
Bear with me for a couple of minutes.
Sorry.
Sorry, technology's just running a wee bit slow again. Just bear with me. Right, Michael will run that through that plan with you.
Yeah, so this is the road improvement works that they've had consented as part of the extension application. So yeah, that shows the service lay-by and then the bollards around the edge of the footpath to prevent the vehicle parking. Double yellow lines as well around the Mill Hall Avenue junction to try and stop people parking up on the corner there. But yeah, this is ultimately the works that the applicant needs to implement as part of their approved extension.
So, could you put your wee cursor on that, could you? And just show where the cars parking spaces are? Don't really. I don't know, work on it.
I'll put my mic on, that might help. If you can see the roadway, you see the building to the right-hand side, and you can see on the road the two cars that are parked.
All right, yeah.
That's the service lay-by in there.
Right, got you now.
So you would have a couple of cars two or three cars able to park in there, and you have the bollards, which are the sort of dots all the way round the back of the
So
service.
nothing come right into the front of the shop there at all. Right. Got you now, Fiona. Thanks very much for that. Thanks, Michael. That's clarified things a wee bit.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Just ask you just to press the mic button. Yep.
Sorry.
Thanks. So I'm going to bring in Councillor Watts, then Councillor Lennox, and then Councillor Saxton.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly going to paragraph 21, where we've got listed all the various planning policies. One of the planning policies that I don't see listed, and I can't find it really as I've gone through the report, is probably LDP policy TC6. And my question would be, does the proposal then meet all the criteria under policy TC6 regarding the suitability of hot food takeaways within town centres? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Watts, did you say TC6? I don't have a TC6 in the LDP. Apologies for just double checking with you if that's the one you mean.
It comes up on the East Ayrshire Council website as TC6, which was regarding hot food takeaways.
Just double check for you. Bear with us.
Councillor Watts, if you're okay, what I think we'll do is we'll move on to the next question while our planning colleagues search for that. So I'm going to bring in Councillor Lennox. Thanks.
Hi, good morning, Chair, and thanks again. Apologies, I can't be away in chambers this morning, but believe me, it wouldn't be a welcome addition to the committee this morning with this cold that I've got. So apologies for that. The question I had was really around, I read in the papers at one point that one of the objectors had said that this particular cabin had been, it was written into the title deeds that it was to be retained for community use. I'm just wondering if that would be a material consideration or if whether we should just not take that into account. Thanks, Chair.
Apologies, Councillor Lennox. Can I ask you to repeat that for me? I was slightly distracted looking for Councillor Watt's answer there, but could you just repeat what you said? I do apologise.
Well, thank goodness it's not just me that's easily distracted, Fiona. I was just saying that in the papers at one point, I believe one of the objectors said that the cabin had to be, it was written into the title deeds that the cabin had to be retained, or it was only for community use. I'm just wondering if that, regardless of whether that's fact or not, whether that should be a material consideration.
Apologies. Thank you very much, Councillor Lennox. No, that wouldn't be a material planning consideration. That would be a legal matter or a civil matter that the applicant would have to address through his lawyers and address that with the title. So that would not be a material planning consideration for the application in front of you.
Thanks, Councillor Lennox. Are we in a position to answer Councillor Watts' query?
The TC6 that you've referenced is from the 2017 plan, so it's been removed from the current 2024 version. So there's no TC6.
Right. Okay, that's fine.
Oh.
That's fine. It's still showing on the council website there. So
I think they've kept the previous local development plan on the website, but it's under a different section. But we'll maybe have that double checked for you with our policy colleagues. But it is still on the website because it's the previous LDP in case people wish to refer back. We do tend to keep one local development plan back on the website. So, but we'll double check that for you just to make sure it's clear for people when they look at it.
that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Watts. So I'm going to bring in Councillor Sangster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really just a couple of comments. I went on the site visit and looking at the development next door, the Premier store, actually it's in keeping with the area and it does look like these plans and to do with takeaways also going to be in keeping with the area, which was a concern of mine. I understand the gentleman that was objecting. I understand his concerns, particularly around traffic and safety. However, my comment would be that a takeaway such as this or any business, they're not responsible for driver behaviour. Drivers are responsible for parking safely, and I don't really think that can be taken into consideration. Everything I've seen and everything I've heard, I don't have any objections to this, and as long as the conditions are followed. Conditions are very important, are really important. So I've got no objections. That was all I wanted. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sangster. So I've got a question. I think it's really welcome that the filtration system is going to be internal and it's only going to be extracting at the chimney. But my question's round about the actual change of the filters. Is there any monitoring schedule in the filtration system?
The filtration system and the ventilation and the extraction fans, etc., would all be approved as part of this application by yourselves in conjunction with environmental health. Environmental health thereafter have controls relative to nuisance, etc. There's also, I don't know whether the food safety legislation would come into it or not, to be honest, in terms of, the regular inspections to make sure everything's been done properly. But I do know that colleagues in environmental health will have monitoring that they're able to do as part of, the sort of any complaints, etc., that they might get if filters aren't being changed, and then we can do that. I think also as part of this, we could probably ask for some sort of monitoring plan as to how it's, we could maybe widen out the condition if you felt it was necessary. I'm just going to have a wee look at the wording of the condition to see if there's anything in there, just to remind myself. You can bear with me. I think what's in there actually does say that, everything will be done to appropriate legislation and coverage, etc. So maybe then comes on to colleagues in environmental health if there was any complaints to go out, or ourselves through the enforcement process if we got any future complaints, to double check that everything was being done in accordance with the approved details.
Yeah, so it'd fall to enforcement, really?
Probably would do, yes, to be honest, and probably environmental health too, but that would be done as part of standard checks.
Thanks very much. Members, Councillor McGee.
I think condition 2A regarding like odours, regarding the ventilation, that I was just going to ask myself, does it go far enough in planning terms? Because it will be, if we were minded to approve this today, it might be something that folk have to deal with later on, and we've had various examples there elsewhere. The other issue regarding the objector this morning made a point that it's chaotic. in this area. And that is factually correct, Ken. At certain times of the day, round about this area is pretty chaotic, but you could say the same for the Irvine Road junction and the Sunnyside junction as well. And there is various plans in place, and as we've seen, there is plans in place to sort the parking out at the new kind of addition to the Premier store. The one thing I would point out, and Barry's touched on it regarding the car park at the back of the Westin, we have got various reports that there are cars parked there, no all day, but for weeks on end, some of them without tax and insurance. So people aren't using it as a car park, they're using it as a kind of dumping ground. And again, Nara is aware of it, but I think that's something that we maybe need to look at in the short term to maybe fix that. Again, folk maybe no be delighted if they've maybe got waiting times there, or they've got to pay for their parking, etc. But it does mean that we haven't got full capacity at that car park when there's folk parking up cars for not just days, but weeks on end. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McGee. Members, any further questions? Or going to bring in our planning colleagues again.
Thank you. Just in terms of your first point, Councillor McGee, regarding condition 2, we did actually speak to colleagues in environmental health about specific wording, and they were happy with it. Further information that would come back to them to agree a part of a consultation process. Just having a wee look at it now, I think it is probably a good idea that we maybe add in a detailed maintenance scheme to come in as part of condition 2. So with members, if you did want to go for approval today, I would maybe suggest that we amend condition 2A to say something on the lines of full specifications of the cooling and extract systems, including a detailed maintenance scheme, shall come in, etc. Maybe that would be an appropriate wording if you wanted to approve it today, depending what your decision is, obviously, at the end of the item. But that's maybe something we could do. Other than that, I've got nothing else to add unless anybody wants to ask any more questions.
Yeah, I think that would cover my point round about the odours. Would that cover yourself, Councillor McGee?
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, yes.
Members, are we in a position to come to a determination in this application at this point? So, I'll be looking for proposal. I'm just going to bring in Councillor Friel.
I propose that we go with the recommendation.
I would second that, Chair.
Through you, Chair, would that be with the amended wording to condition 2A?
Members, is anyone else otherwise minded? No. Aileen, can I just ask you to record that?
So for the purposes of the minute, the application has been approved, subject to the conditions listed with the updated amendment to condition 2A. 2A, sorry.
Thanks, Aileen. So members, we're on to item 4 on the agenda, and that is planning application number 25/0004/S36. And this is a consultation under section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989 relating to the proposed Breezy Hill wind farm, and it's comprising 28 wind turbines of up to 149.9 metres to blade tip height, including battery energy storage system and associated infrastructure at Breezy Hill Wind Farm within North Kyle Forest Estate, Cumnock, by Toby Taylor, Breezy Hill Energy Limited. I'm going to hand over to David Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Morning, members. The purpose of this report is to present a consultation under Section 36 of the Electricity Act for consideration by the Planning Committee. The application site is located in land predominantly used for commercial forestry within part of the Kyle Forest area to the north of Dunmellington and approximately 1.7 kilometres southeast of the settlement of Rankison. The development comprises of 20 turbines at 149.9 metres to tip and a 40 megawatt BESS development battery energy storage system with associated infrastructure including track, hard standings, access, drainage and electricity infrastructure. an anticipated operational period of 40 years, and that's all set out at paragraphs 3 to 10 of your papers. Consultation responses to the Council and to the Scottish Government are set out at paragraphs 13 to 41, noting that the aviation consultees currently maintain an objection, and Nature Scot have asked for further information to be provided, primarily in respect of ornithological matters. 2 representations from third parties have been submitted to the Energy Consent Unit, as set out at paragraph 42. I'm just now going to share my screen and I'll take you through some of the details of the development, if you bear with me. So this is the general site location. It just shows Domelington just to the south. Rankison is just close to the northwest, just at the top of the plan, and the site accesses are shown coming off the A713 in the southwest and the B741 on the southeast on either side of Domelington. This is the proposed site layout. It shows the turbine locations. Also, it's showing borrow pit search areas, which are the areas marked in brown, compounds and the battery energy storage site, and the various hatching colours. And new track is shown in green and purple, with the existing track within the site shown in pink. It's a cumulative wind farm map showing North Kyle Wind Farm to the immediate east and southeast, and the consented Greenburn, Overhill and Knockkippen and Knockshinnock farm schemes within or around 5 kilometres, which is the first broken line edging round about the site, with other more distant schemes which are primarily to the south. This is now the blade tip zone of theoretical visibility, or ZTV. The orange colour is where 16 to 20, so the majority of the turbine tips are theoretically visible, noting that the visibility is most prevalent to the north of the scheme, but also noting that the ZTVs don't account for screening effects from vegetation or buildings. So this is the absolute worst case scenario if there was nothing there on the ground and it was only the landscape itself. Just turn to a handful of viewpoints now. So the next few slides are from viewpoint 1, which is at Rankison, and this viewpoint's around 2 kilometres northwest of the development. You see the turbines showing the existing landscape just to the top, with the wire line immediately below it, showing the extent of the scheme that's visible from there. The next 2 pages are the photo montages, but they've been split just so that you get the proper scale. So that's the kind of left-hand side of the view from that edge of Rankison. You can see the turbines located kind of on and behind the containing landscape, and the kind of right-hand side view from there. The next slides are from the Dumfries House estate. This is about just over 10 kilometres to the northeast. This is the entrance just to the side of Auchinleck, so the top of the estate. Again, the existing view at the top with a wire line below. You see the kind of extent of other turbines from existing schemes shown on the wire line with the development in red. And perhaps difficult to make out at this distance, but that's the photo montage showing the turbines there, located fairly centrally in the view. Just moving on to the next slides, this is viewpoint 5. This is on the A70 between Drongan and Ochiltree, approximately 6 kilometres to the north of the development. This view shows some of the turbines coming forward of the containing skyline. So you'll see on the wire line at the bottom, some of the turbines just appear to kind of step below the containing landscape. And that's one of the points that has been flagged up by our landscape architect consultant, and just to note that this scheme does come a wee bit further north than some of the existing. And that is the photo montage from that viewpoint. The next slides are viewpoint 8. This is from Drongan. This is about 4.8 kilometres northwest of the development. You'll note that there's buildings here providing a lot of the screening. So this is taken from the centre of the settlement. So the buildings are providing screening for parts of the development. The wire line showing that if the buildings and vegetation weren't there, you would see the scheme. So again, the existing view at the top and the wire line below with the theoretical view, many of which will be blocked, which you'll then see on the photo montage. So you can see some of the turbines located kind of between and behind the buildings, but some of them not able to be viewed from this location. This is kind of indicative. This is the kind of idea of having different viewpoints where you will see some locations where views are much more filtered, whereas some more kind of rural locations you'll see a bit more of the scheme more clearly. So as you moved about any settlement or anywhere, views will obviously change, but this is a kind of representative view from the settlement. So moving on to viewpoint 10, this is on Scares Road to the northeast of the development, around 5.4 kilometres to the nearest turbine. The turbines are seen here to the side of North Kyle and closer than Knockkippen, but mainly viewed behind the containing landscape, albeit with most hubs and blades visible. So again, existing view at the top, you'll see that the North Kyle turbines are to the left of that view, with the scheme essentially looking as if it extends the North Kyle wind farm from this viewpoint. This is viewpoint 13 at Sinclairstown, this being one of the closer viewpoints at 2.4 kilometres north. The turbines are relatively prominent at this distance, with many theoretically seen at full height. You can see there on the wire line, the turbines are relatively clear. However, as shown in the photo montage, the vegetation does intervene to some extent from this viewpoint, so it filters the view, but the turbines will be seen at 2.4 kilometres, so at 149.9 metres high, they will obviously be fairly visible and prominent structures at that kind of distance. Turning down to the last of the viewpoints that I'll be showing you, this is viewpoint 15 at Craigs Road, approximately 4 kilometres northwest, and in a similar viewing direction as the Rankinson viewpoint that I first showed you, but that's this is double the distance than the previous one. Here the turbines are seen in the landscape context. The foothills with forest character type can be seen above the settlement, but with the transitional nature of the landscape visible here, where you're coming down into slightly more settled landscapes, which is immediately in front of the wind farm. You see that on the wire line, the proposed turbines would sit in front of North Kyle from this viewpoint, so they would appear as a closer wind farm, but with other turbines behind, and the photo montage that goes with that viewpoint. My final slide here is just an indicative view of the bays. The significant further detail of this would need to be brought forward, and it's proposed to be secured through planning conditions if consent was to be granted. The bays is located in the eastern part of the site, and there's very limited public views of it. It is quite a contained location in the site and nearer the North Kyle wind farm side. You bear with me, I'll just end this slideshow. So I'll just take you through some assessment points now, members. The development plan, as always mentioned at this point, it does not have primacy in Section 36 developments, but it is a useful and logical assessment tool to base our assessment against. So the key matters of interest are set out from paragraphs 46 to 141. With the key points to note that there's strong in principle support for such development from national and local policies in respect to renewable energy generation and the positive effects in carbon emissions over the lifetime of development. The total output of the development, 140 megawatts, is a useful contribution to Scottish Government targets for renewable energy generation, and it carries quite significant weight in the planning balance. There are significant landscape and visual effects from the development, primarily as a result of the turbine elements falling on the host and parts of adjacent landscapes and in a range of visual receptors, including Rankison and Sinclairstone, from rural areas including public roads and also from a number of residential properties, all predominantly to the north of the development. Planning policy is clear that effects from such development is inevitable, and in considering these impacts carefully, they are considered to be commensurate with the scale of the development, with no impact considered to be of such an extent as to be unacceptable. There are no unacceptable impacts in a range of different matters, including the historic environment, forestry and the water environment, often subject to planning conditions. Some further ornithological information has been requested by Nature Scot. However, the absence of such has not prevented an assessment which concludes that there are no unacceptable biodiversity or natural heritage matters for the Council, subject to conditions. There are no unacceptable impacts on communities or individual dwellings by way of visual impact, with no property adjudged to receive any overbearing visual impacts, and noise impacts can be kept within acceptable levels, subject to controlling conditions, as confirmed by the Council's noise expert. Shadow flicker could occur, however, this can be controlled and mitigated through the use of planning conditions. There would be some potential economic benefits of the development through job creation and job support during construction, and the provision of a plan through condition to secure how net economic benefits can be secured and maximised in the longer term. There are no unacceptable impacts on trunk or local roads, subject to appropriate controlling conditions, noting the positions of both ARA and Transport Scotland. The development uses the same routes, at least in part, as the constructed North Kyle wind farm, including abnormal loads entering the site to the west of development, Domellington, off the A713. Aviation consultees currently object to development, but it's considered that this should be a matter for ministers to address, and that this should not affect the Council's consultation response. Agreement on the provision of a legal agreement to secure decommissioning and restoration has been reached with the developer. As noted within the conclusions at paragraphs 142 to 147, there is in principle support for the development, and it represents a useful contribution to renewable energy production. There will be some adverse effects from the development, primarily in respect of landscape and visual impacts, and to a lesser extent cumulative landscape and visual impacts, but these are considered to be generally commensurate with a development of this kind, and no impact is so significant as to be unacceptable. All other matters can be adequately addressed through the use of planning conditions. It's considered that the development is compliant overall with the development plan, and most other material considerations are generally supportive of the development. Legal and financial risk implications are set out at paragraphs 148 to 153, noting that the applicant would be expected to enter into a legal agreement with the Council to secure a planning monitoring officer and a financial guarantee. The applicant has agreed to this in principle. It is noted that should the Council raise an objection to development, this would likely trigger further procedures to examine such matters, and participation in such a process would be necessary. The recommendation set out paragraph 2, which is to object unless a legal agreement is concluded and the conditions from page 50 of the papers are imposed by ministers, subject to any agreed modifications following negotiation. Thanks, members.
Very much, David. So, members, I'm handing over to yourself for any questions. I've got Councillor Filson.
Thanks, Chair. I've no objections to the application as long as the aviation concerns are addressed. But just you mentioned there, David, on the light flicker came from the wind turbines. And I'm reading the papers there. I think it's the nearest community is Rankison, and the 3 farms it's nearest to the site there. What would be the process for them if it did become an issue with the light flicker? Because it is really annoying. I've came across it before in my past. Just how it affects you again when you're actually walking round about them again. So I just wonder what the process would be for the farmers to actually raise their concerns at the time if that did become an issue. How it would be managed.
There's a kind of couple of elements to this, so we would expect a bit more work from the developer post consent to further narrow down what the actual impact might be. It's quite a specific set of circumstances when shadow flicker occurs. You have to have the right angles. You have to have the right sun conditions, and you also have to have windows that can be affected. So a lot of the properties are probably unlikely to be affected, but they have done a worst case scenario and extrapolated from that. So I would expect a bit further work from them to kind of narrow down what the impact may well be, and to initially come forward with some mitigation to try and avoid it completely, which they can program turbines to switch off in the kind of key times where this might happen, so that you essentially avoid it. The council's always taken that approach where we would rather avoid it than have anyone putting up with a certain amount. We don't think it's acceptable at all because it can be controlled. If even following that there is still further impacts, it would always be the case that someone could contact the council, and there would be opportunities there for that to be investigated. So the applicant would essentially have an expert go and look at that, and either there's different mitigations can be put forward, but it might be even just a tweak to the shutdown protocol. It's fairly standard. We have kind of taken that approach for a long time now, so that essentially nobody should be affected, and thankfully over this period of time it's not something that's ever really come up. We have had one or two and it's been picked up, but it's a very rare thing, and usually it's avoided through proper mitigation at the start. But there's always an opportunity for someone to raise that to us and for that to be investigated.
Thanks for that clarification, David. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Members, any further questions for the Planning Department? I don't see anybody online. Councillor Kyle.
My problem with this is the over concentration of wind farms and storage. They're taking away an awful lot of the scenery that people use. And all you see going over when you come up the Melton Road is wind farms. And I'm quite certain Councillor Wilson will say the same. The battery storage is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's just impossible to see anything but wind farms or turbines. Thank you.
I don't think it was a question. There's more of a comment. Yep. Anyone else? Yep. Councillor Watts.
It's not so much a question, but I would move that certainly myself would move an outright objection based on the scale and the massing, the cumulative impact, battery safety. I don't think that the battery safety really, there's a public risk there. The environmental damage and the deforestation. So I would move an outright objection.
Thanks for that, Councillor Watts. Don't see it. Is there any further questions or clarification required at this point? Councillor Lennox.
Thanks again, Chair. Excuse me, I'm just choking slightly there. No, I think at some point in time, and I've mentioned this in previous applications, Section 36 applications that have come before us, you can definitely see from the wire lines that David shared that the horizon is becoming increasingly dense in terms of the amount of turbines that we see on the horizon, and I'm just starting to think to myself, and something that I've mentioned previously is the fact that there will come a point in time when we do reach saturation point in terms of the amount of wind farms and turbines that we see in the landscape. Now, I do appreciate that a lot of the land that's been used for these wind farms is somewhat derelict in the sense that it's quite remote and isn't really getting used for anything currently. They're probably in the past it's been used for forestry, and therefore it's generating income both for the local economy and the more broader economy. And essentially that's what these wind farms are doing as well. They're achieving national policy, but I'm just, and it's maybe David could comment on the fact that as an authority that I think we need some guidance as an authority in terms of where do we draw the line. I do appreciate that communities are benefiting from in terms of financial benefits for these wind farms, but at the same time there's the visual impact as well. I'm not minded, like Councillor Watts, to refuse the application. I don't think we're at that stage yet, but I think as an authority and as a planning committee, we're going to need we need some real guidelines in terms of how do we know when to draw the line.
Thanks, Councillor Lennox. I think David was wanting to come in anyway, so I think I'll just bring in David at this time.
Thanks, Chair. I'll address Councillor Lennox's point first, and then I've got a wee point on the shadow flicker thing just to come back on for a bit of clarity, if that's okay. In terms of guidelines, the position is that each case has in its own merits, so that there's not a clear and obvious cut-off where you can just say under planning policy that it's just unacceptable to have any more anywhere. But the point that Councillor Lennox makes and other councillors have made as well in terms of the cumulative impact is a relevant consideration. We will continue to give you best advice that we can. We take the guidance of a landscape architect as well, who reviews the applicant's submissions and gives us advice, and that's all there. And we'll come to a balanced view and give you what we think is the right position. But there's nothing that would allow us to just say we're just not entertaining any more, period. It would have to be site specific to each scheme. Now, that ultimately will be for decision makers, part yourselves, to decide whether a particular scheme is unacceptable in relation to that cumulative impact. There are other schemes after this one still to come. Officers are very aware of cumulative impacts in the southern part of the district. Obviously on this one, our advice is we don't think cumulatively this is unacceptable. It does add to a pattern. There is an additional wind farm to be seen on the horizon from many viewpoints, but seeing them at that distance we think is not unacceptable. It is an area where there is a number of renewable schemes. It's an area that's suitable for it, and the policies generally support that. But for every scheme there is a balance to be struck, and depending which schemes come forward, it is perfectly reasonable to say that a scheme is an unacceptable cumulative impact, taking account of the existing pattern. That ultimately will be for decision makers on each case. So I'm afraid I don't have an easy answer for you, Councillor Lennox, in terms of there's a certain line or a certain threshold that would automatically mean that there's no more. We would have to just consider each scheme on its merits, taking account of all the relevant advice and all the information that we have, including officer advice to you, and using your judgment against each particular scheme. There probably will come schemes where cumulatively they may well be unacceptable. Obviously this one we don't think that's the case, but we certainly are alive to that. But it's certainly, as decision makers, it's something entirely relevant for you to be thinking about, and it is a matter of judgment. But there's no clear, easy answer, I'm afraid, to say that this is the kind of point where we say no more, because the planning policy and the energy regime is not set up like that in Scotland. It is a very permissive regime, and it's each case on its own merits. So hopefully that gives you a bit of direction, although maybe not quite the answer you would hope for, but it maybe gives you something. If I can then just briefly touch on the shadow flicker. I was given advice there on the basis that we had a condition on that list. I think we've actually missed it off, so it's I'm glad you've asked the question. It's been picked up with colleagues, so we've talked about that in the report, but it's been an error on our part of not adding it. So in terms of any response, if it was to raise to follow the recommendation with the conditions, I would just ask for a committee's agreement for officers just to pull together a condition to make sure that that's addressed properly, and apologies that was missed.
Thanks, David. I'm going to bring in Councillor McGee.
Aye, thanks. And just on the cumulative effect, I totally agree with Councillor Lennox, and as David says, there are quite a few have mentioned this issue. And I think that's the point I would make. It's very difficult, kind of, you're coming to a planning meeting to say, I think that is a cumulative effect this time. I don't mean, I'm no minded to object to this application, but further ones coming, it's the wording. Again, we're objecting on the basis of a cumulative effect, just because. Again, I think we need some more detail of what we could be saying. So I don't know where we've had kind of councillors' conversations before, where we've invited not just planners, but all councillors into the conversation. I certainly think we could do a councillors' conversation on cumulative effect, and again on data centres. I can we got some, and I can I'm straying away from maybe this planning application, but here they're building one in Louisiana. It's bigger than Manhattan. It uses 3 times the energy New Orleans. So I think we need to keep updated on new developments. And to go back to this subject, cumulative effect, I think we could do with a wee bit more education on it. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear that, Councillor McGee. It's not a straightforward topic. It is hard to get your head round about some of the effects cumulatively and so on. I'd be happy to facilitate something like that, and I would suggest that we bring our landscape architect consultants to that to give you some professional advice in terms of what they're looking at, and whether they'll go so far as to give opinions on what they think is acceptable or not, they're unlikely, but they will certainly be able to give some kind of professional element to that in terms of the landscape and visual assessment type approach. So yeah, we'd be happy to take something like that forward. We can even do some site visits as well for them to offer comments on things down there. So I'm sure something like that can be organised. And likewise with the data centre, yeah, we can certainly investigate that, because I think everyone's struggling for information on that and to try and get their heads around it. So it would probably benefit quite widely, I think.
Just on the data centres, certainly Scottish Government and the National Planning Hub are rolling out some training for planning officers. So there was an event held this week, which Barry Douglas attended. She's done some excellent notes, and I don't have an issue of actually sort of distributing those notes, but I think you're right. We need to get sort of a councillor conversation where we can discuss it round the table. Certainly we're being educated at the moment about sort of data centres on that, and they're getting experts in from largely sort of down south on that have been through this on that. So it's something that we can put onto the agenda.
Could just come back in.
Yeah, just going to bring you in, Councillor McGee. Yep.
Aye. You say, I think we got some notes kind of planning regarding the data centres, but it reminded me of the time we had the councillors' conversation about fracking. I thought it was a propaganda show for the frackers. Half the stuff was just absurd that they were saying. So I just want a wee bit more education on them, because I think data centres are an unknown. And likewise, I agree with David, Ken. I think it would be good to have a conversation about cumulative effect with somebody, kind of like a landscape kind of architect. I think that would be helpful.
Thanks, Councillor McGee. I'm going to bring in Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we obviously, we always look at every application on its own merit, and everyone is slightly different. I mean, you know, we've got the battery storage here, and I do have concerns, big concerns about the battery storage element. But on this application, the visual impact to the area, the cumulative effect, and I think I hear what Councillor McGee is saying about you know, as having council conversations about that. But I think in my mind, cumulative effect is almost, it's almost a personal thing in a way. It's something that you look at because somebody could look at something and go, yep, that's too much. But another person could look at it and say, that's not too much. So I think that's still quite difficult to pin down. But, you know, the visual effect from Dumfries House, you know, one of our biggest attractions within the south of the area, you're looking at that screenshot, and yes, I know it's in the distance, but again, it's just adding on to those views in the south of the area. So yeah, that's all I'll say on that.
Thanks, Councillor Watts. So you are still moving an outright objection at this point?
Yes, I would move, and I still move an outright objection to this app. Yeah.
Going to bring in Councillor Filson.
I take into consideration what my colleagues are saying, mentioning about the cumulative effect, but I don't think this application does that basically, Ken. So I'd be moving. We don't object to the application.
That's noted. So members, any further questions? Because I know we've got an outright objection to the table and a movement for approval as stated in page 19, paragraph 2. So Councillor Watts, yeah. Do you have a seconder for your? No. No seconder. I'm happy to second Councillor Filson. Yeah. Councillor Watts, you want to come in?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I obviously don't have a seconder, but just to make sure that my objection is noted. Thank you.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Members, there's no other proposals. I'll be happy to approve recommendations to page 19, paragraph 2, with the additional shadow flicker condition. Yeah, thanks very much, David. The blank moment there. So, and Councillor Watts, obviously, it's noted. So, thanks very much, members. Neil, can you just record that?
So for the purposes of the minute, the application has been approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the report and with the additional shadow flicker condition.
Recommended, we don't object.
Oh, we recommend that we don't object. Sorry.
Thanks, members. That concludes today's business. We do have stuff once we go offline to go on. So can I ask IT colleagues to please stop the recording?